Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's wonderful to see so many of you here tonight. It's a beautiful night, and there's many other things we could all be doing, but we're here for a very important and dynamic discussion that we're going to have with our Secretary of State, and we're so happy for you to be here with us tonight. Thank you. And our moderator, Peter Von Depp. So I want to thank Peter also, and thank Charlie from CCTV. And I want to mention that the discussion tonight is going to be recorded, and it will be available later this week, and we'll be sending out a link for anybody who wants to watch it again and send it to all your friends. And I also want to thank the staff at the Fletcher Free Library for hosting us tonight and for all the work they did to make this event possible. And I want to introduce Gail Batsom, who's the Director of Development and Communication.
Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right. I just want to thank you so much for coming to the Fletcher Free Library. A library is a wonderful place for civic discourse and to learn about our government. We are a municipal library, so I want to thank you all for coming and thank Secretary of State, or Vermont Secretary of State, which is just fabulous, for coming here and presenting today. A little bit of housekeeping for you. If anybody needs a bathroom, they're on the second floor. Head back toward the elevators and just go down that staircase or elevator to the second floor. If everybody could turn off their cell phones during this, that would be really helpful. And if anybody has any questions or anything, I'll be in the back of the room if you need any help getting anywhere. So thank you again. Thank you.
And I would just like to give a quick reminder that our Queen City monthly meeting will go back to our regular location and time, September 1st at 5:30 at the Queen City Brewery. And so just a reminder, it will be in the newsletter. On the agenda, we will have a speaker from the League of Women Voters talking about the volunteer opportunities for the election that we can support, as well as an update from Blaine Paxton on the ICE facilities in Williston. So it will be in our newsletter and Front Porch Forum, and please look out for our announcements in Front Porch Forum and our newsletter, because we are, until the election, we're going to be publishing a lot of election-related opportunities and information events. And now I would like to introduce our moderator, Peter Von Depp, who is a professor and a chairperson at the University of Vermont Political Science Department. He is an expert on democracy and backsliding. So he's...
Wait a minute, so am I.
So, perfect. His research has focused mostly on African politics, but addresses concerns regarding democracy's challenges worldwide and in our own country. He teaches classes on authoritarianism, African politics, and the challenges facing democracy in our day and age. So, Peter, thank you for being here.
So thank you very much. I am delighted to be here. I'm delighted to see so many folks out tonight on a beautiful night. And winter is coming. Just a quick sort of protocol reminder. The way we're going to run the question and answer moment is for you all to bring questions or to get questions up to me, and then I will sort through them and ask them to the secretary. So let me introduce our speaker. Our speaker is Sarah Copeland Hanzas, who is Vermont's 39th Secretary of State, elected in 2022. She has had a career and a life that's been highly centered on service. She's been an educator, a youth coach, a business owner, and a state legislator. And in her time in the state legislature, she was majority leader. She was also the chair of the House Government Operations Committee. She's passionate about civics, as a testament to her being here tonight, something that's very near and dear to my heart, and very committed to civic engagement, and has made civic education and engagement a priority for her office. She currently serves on the executive board of the National Association of Secretaries of State. So we are in great hands to learn about elections and democracy, and probably a few other things tonight. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over carefully.
Thank you. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to decline to tether myself right here. I like to be able to pace a little bit in case I can't see everybody's eyes as y'all are tucked in back there. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's a beautiful night. There are lots of things that you could be doing, not the least of which watching the sunset on this heavenly summer day. We are so fortunate to live in Vermont where we have gorgeous summers like this. I always like to think that I'm just soaking it all up right now because February feels like the longest month. And so let's channel all of that goodness and energy that comes from these long summer days. I am Sarah Copeland Hanzas. I am really honored to be here with you tonight. Every single time I get an invitation to talk with a group of folks around the state about how our elections are working and what you can do to help, I always jump at that opportunity because elections at the end of the day and democracy in general is really a team sport. It's about coming together with other people who are concerned about the same issues or who want to accomplish the same things and building a group, building momentum, and trying to accomplish a goal. And what I often say to young people when I visit schools is, civics is not just memorizing the 3 branches of government and, checks and balances and, being able to list the 5 protections from the First Amendment of the Constitution. Civics is really understanding where the levers of power are so that you can pull them. And if you don't understand where the levers of power are and how to exercise your voice as an individual in a democracy or as a group in a democracy, you're going to feel left out, right? You're going to feel disenfranchised, frustrated, despondent, all of those things that I think really lead me to be focused on civic education and empowering people to make the change that they think needs to happen. So when we talk about elections, now the Secretary of State's office does many more things than just elections. We run a Safe at Home program, which is an address confidentiality program for survivors of stalking, human trafficking, or domestic violence. The legislature expanded eligibility for providers and recipients of protected health care. So the Safe at Home program is under our office. Business registrations, every single business in the state comes to our office to register. We license over 80 different profession types, different certifications and pathways into career. So most everybody except for doctors, teachers, plumbers, and electricians is coming through us to get their certificate or their license. And we're the keeper of the state archives. And this is something that is really fun to those of us who are kind of history geeks and information buffs. But sometimes people's eyes glaze over when we talk about archives. And so the way I like to describe the archives is the archives are maintained by us so that you can see what your government has done on your behalf. And we are required to keep all of the records and archives of the entire arc of history so that the important decisions that government has made in the past can be understood by us now and into the future. It is the ultimate in transparency and the guarantee of transparency that we invest in archives in our state and in this nation, so that we can understand why was that decision made, how was it made, who influenced that decision. And so it's an honor to be the keeper of the state archives. However, the hot spot these days is really elections. And we knew that we were headed for some interesting times when we saw the results of the presidential election in 2024. You know, this is not our first rodeo with this president. So, and I was in the legislature when Trump was in his first term. We took a lot of actions back then to begin to protect Vermonters from some of the harmful actions of the Trump administration. For instance, the constitutional amendment that was passed in 2022 guaranteeing reproductive freedom in Vermont came about, we started it when we knew that Trump was elected the first time. So that came about starting in 2016 during the legislative sessions of 17 and 19 as well. And then COVID slowed things down a little bit there. But so we understood that this was going to be a challenging time because this president can't seem to let go of the notion that he won the 2020 election and that somebody had to have cheated. And I'll get back to that later because I'm going to try not to be sassy with you just in the first 5 minutes of my talk tonight. However, when we talk about elections, when we talk about how we run elections in Vermont, we talk about free, fair, accessible, and secure. And all four of those things are important. It's kind of a four-legged table there that has to have all four in order for our elections to work. It has to be free so that there are not barriers put between you and your access to the ballot box. It has to be fair so that there aren't arbitrary rules about how elections are conducted or who gets to participate or how you can observe how your election is being conducted in your community. They have to be accessible. We have to be thinking about this in terms of the working parent who's got, you know, working 2 jobs, trying to get the kids home to, you know, to feed them before getting them up and off to school in the morning. It has to be accessible for the busiest among us. It can't be something that is only the luxury of people who are retired or self-employed and can choose their own schedule. And they have to be secure, right? Security is increasingly a challenge in this day and age, and I don't know about you, but all of the news reports that I hear about AI and its hacking abilities has me doubly concerned. And you know, having good conversations with all of our vendors and all of our security folks to make sure that we have the best security that we can around our election systems. We have. At the end of the day, we have secure elections because we have really good people and we have really good processes in place for how our elections are conducted. And we audit every time we have a general election. We pick a handful of towns, we bring their ballots in, we run them through a different kind of technology tabulator so that we can see whether the tabulator that we used on election night is giving us the same results. And 99 times out of 100, those results match. And the times when it doesn't, it's usually because of an issue around human error. A human being misread a mark on a ballot, or a human being misread a write-in, or something like that. We have very secure elections on purpose because we have 247 duly sworn town and city clerks who wake up every day thinking about how am I going to run this election fairly in my community. And we've got a great team of folks at the Secretary of State's office that is supporting them. So the four-legged stool is really how we guide our work and how we focus our investment of time and energy and resources in the office to make sure that our elections really work. I kid you not, every action that this administration has taken with regard to elections has been a threat to one or all of those four basic aspects of good elections. And I want to run through a few of them and then talk more about what we are doing to protect against it. Because I don't want to be all doom and gloom. It's going to be okay. We're going to have fair, accessible, free, and secure elections here in Vermont now, this year, and moving forward. But it's taken a lot of fight. It's taken a lot of pushing back against the actions of this administration in Washington, D.C. And I feel so fortunate to be doing this job in Vermont with the partners that we have for you people, the good people of Vermont. That makes it all worth it. So, chronologically speaking, one of the very first things that we heard out of this administration that was a threat to our basic election infrastructure was the dissolution of the team of election security advisors within the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. That's called CISA, and I'm just gonna shorthand it for you. CISA is, cybersecurity and elections were deemed critical infrastructure. CISA protects critical infrastructure from threats, from hacking and penetration attempts from foreign entities or domestic entities across the board. So they're protecting things like your hospital systems with your medical data. They're protecting your water systems, the electricity grid. And when it became clear that foreign entities were trying to hack our elections back in 2016 during the presidential election then, everybody remember who they were hacking for? We'll come back to that. I told you I'm not going to get spicy right here at the beginning. When it became clear that there were foreign entities trying to attack our elections, CISA designated elections as critical infrastructure. One of the first things that this administration did was to de-designate. Elections are not critical infrastructure. We have not been given a secure briefing. All of the secretaries across the country have top secret clearance, and we have not been given a briefing at all in this election cycle. They are not offering supports to our local election officials. It used to be they would come and do de-escalation training so that our clerks would understand if they're interacting with somebody who's agitated or heightened at the polls. These are the techniques we use to de-escalate. Our clerks, many of them, are a single person working alone in an office on, some back road in Vermont. And it is a really hard time to be an election official when you've got the President of the United States saying they're all criminals and they should be locked up. So that de-escalation training was important, but they were also offering physical security assessments. These are offered by professionals who will come in and say, you might want to consider a plexiglass here, you might want to consider locking that door permanently. These are the things you should do to protect your physical space from either intrusion while you're in the office or, heaven forbid, from somebody trying to come in after hours and gain access to your ballots or your tabulator, which are locked in the vault in every single community in our state. So not to worry, they're not. It's not like they're sitting out on the break room table in the back. So not helpful to remove the CISA supports, not helpful to fire the election security advisors who had just been hired back in late 2023, early 2024, to be the liaison between all of the security folks at CISA and all of the election officials around the country. Our own election director from the Secretary of State's office from Vermont was hired by CISA to be the election security advisor for the Northeast region. We were so proud of him. We were so excited because we knew that we had him on speed dial, and he knew how our elections worked, and he knew what the threats were that he was hearing from the intelligence community, and we felt really good about that, that position, that program, that liaison. So security has gone down because of what this administration has done from day one. Now, what are we doing to make up for it, I'm sure, is what you're thinking, right? Certainly you're not going to just sit and cry about water under the bridge. Everything that we're doing is harder and more expensive than it would be if we had a federal agency helping support the states in doing this. But we are doing the things that we can do. Now, we can't manufacture a, security briefing with, secret clearance because they're just not sharing that information with us. But what we are doing is we're strengthening our relationships with other states. We are strengthening our information sharing channels through the National Association of Secretaries of State so that we can get information to each other very quickly. In 2024, the information sharing that was available actually helped us to intercept a suspicious envelope that was identical to one that had contained a white powder that was opened in an election office in, I think, Washington State. We had an image of that ballot as soon as they found it and found that it had white powder in it. We had an image, we shared it with our state postal sorting facility. They found the envelope. Nobody was exposed to anything. I think it was baking soda anyway, so it wasn't an actual attack. But because of that information sharing, we were able to prevent a lot of heartache and a lot of worry by intercepting that before anybody opened that envelope. Now I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about a few of the executive orders that this administration has put out, because those are attacking more the fairness and accessibility and free elections. This notion that we have to clamp down our voter registration rolls by making you show proof of citizenship because there are non-citizens voting in massive amounts is 100% false. It couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, it's gotten so ridiculous with the persistent demands that this president is making on Congress to try to pass the SAVE Act that it feels like there's got to be something else going on there. It's almost like he doesn't want people to be able to vote. I don't know. The incidence of non-citizens actually casting a ballot is so infinitesimally small. That's a really hard word to say at this time of night. Thank you. I think I got the right number of syllables, but it's so small. And the reason it's small is perfectly logical once you put yourself in the mindset of somebody who came to this country from somewhere far away, is making their life here, raising their family here, working a job, maybe starting a business here. The last thing that someone from afar wants to do is to cast a ballot that would be a deportable offense and would prevent them from ever being able to gain citizenship. So there's just no logic that non-citizens are choosing to put all of that at risk, all of their life and their livelihood and their family at risk for one vote. It's illogical. Now, the things that the SAVE Act and the executive order from March of 2025 purport to do that are really difficult to understand is it would criminalize your town or city clerk for registering you to vote in the absence of all of that documentation. Now, I had a legislator friend call me up when the executive order first came out. And she said, I'm not worried about this because I know, how government bureaucracies work, and I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to figure this out, but I was born on an air base in Germany, and I don't have a birth certificate. My citizenship document is a letter signed by the general of that army base in Germany. And then I had another legislator call me, and she said, I am terrified because I don't know if I'm going to be able to vote. Because she was adopted, and her birth certificate says baby girl. So how do you prove that you are that baby girl, right? And the added hurdles that women who may have changed their last names after marrying would have to go through is another, I think, really unfair requirement. But at the end of the day, the harm that I see is that it would criminalize your town or city clerk for not demanding every single piece of information that they need. And it would criminalize her or him for incorrectly assessing one of those documents. Now, how many of you have looked at your own birth certificate in the last few years? So I went to look for my birth certificate after that executive order came out, because I was like, just for kicks, I want to see how hard this is. I couldn't find my birth certificate, so I started the process of ordering one. But then my mom found my birth certificate in my baby book. And it's been in my baby book for 50-something years. And, the way that they made those documents official was by a little stamp, right? And would clamp down on the paper. Well, I can tell you, after 50 years in a baby book laying flat on a shelf, the paper's no longer raised. So my town clerk would have to look at that piece of paper and imagine that she could see that at one point had been clamped by the city of Lake Forest, Illinois, which is where I was born, and she would have to accept that under the threat of criminal penalties, right? So you can imagine that there could be people out there who are 50-something or more years old whose birth certificate might not look particularly official or might have been a bit frayed on the edges, who might be denied their right to vote, right? So there's nothing about requiring documentary proof of citizenship that outweighs this tremendous likelihood that it will disenfranchise people who are legal voters who've been voting for years. And what I come back to time and time again is, if it is important enough for the federal government for voters to be able to prove citizenship, then they need to provide each and every one of us with our own documentary proof of citizenship, free of charge, period, end of story. Everything else is just a poll tax. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about mail-in voting, right? Because accessibility is greatly enhanced by mail-in voting. In fact, in the 3 elections that we've had with universal vote by mail in 2020, 2022, and 2024, we have exceeded turnout for the years previous every single time. So we have high presidential turnout years in 2020 and 2024, a little bit lower in 2022. Those turnout numbers are good and they are strong, but we are still only hitting 70% of Vermonters voting. So that means if you have 2 popular candidates and 70% of Vermonters are roughly splitting that vote, you still have 30% of Vermonters who didn't make a choice. So how do you really know what direction the electorate wants to go if you don't have everybody weighing in? I want to try to get to 100% participation, because then we know that the people who were elected are being elected because they represent an idea or are taking us in a direction that we can be excited about, that the majority of us can be excited about. So how do we get to 100%? Well, we don't get it by removing your ability to vote by mail. What do people tell me about why they like vote by mail? Well, they like being able to sit down with their ballot and look up the candidates who are on their ballot, right? You don't want to have to vote in ignorance, right? So many times we see such drop off, particularly as you get further down the ballot, such drop off because people haven't seen any ads or they haven't been to a rally for one of these smaller local candidates, right? People need information, and to use universal vote by mail most powerfully, our office is now creating a universal voter guide. We are offering every single candidate who's on your ballot the opportunity to give a candidate statement, to share their website, their social media handle, if they want to share their contact information, so that you can look up the people who are on your ballot and a definition of the offices that you're voting for, because if you don't know what makes a good high bailiff, how do you know who to vote for? And you can use the time that you have your ballot in order to make your informed decision. And it's all there for you on vote.vermont.gov. So please use your voter guide. It's available now for the primary. We will do another push after the primary to get more candidates into the voter guide so that when your general election ballot arrives in your mailbox sometime in October, early October, is that the date that we expect they'll all be in the mail? When you get your ballot in early October, you will be able to get a paper copy of your voter guide as well. We're going to mail one to every household for the general election. And that was an investment that I thought was well worth it, because I know that those people who are down on the bottom of the ballot are just as important in impacting your lives, the quality of your life, the things that happen in Montpelier, or the things that are happening in your local community. They're just as important as who is governor or who's running for United States Congress. So I want you to have all the information you need to make those decisions. So back to mail-in voting, though. The executive order that came out most recently that is still partially being litigated right now is with respect to mail-in voting. This administration would like to eliminate mail-in voting, would like to go back to the time when you cannot vote from the convenience of your own kitchen table. And the way they're trying to accomplish this is to require any states that are mailing ballots to upload a list of people who are going to be mailed a ballot, and for then some other government agency to issue a list of people who are eligible to receive a mail-in ballot. Now that is backwards, because in the Constitution it says that states determine the time, place, and manner of elections, and that includes the qualifications for who can receive a ballot and how. We're still waiting for all of that to make its way through the courts, but this notion is utterly preposterous, that the federal government would tell the states which of you are allowed to receive a ballot. That's not the way democracy works. And that's why we're fighting against this and the other executive orders. And before we shift gears to go to questions, I just want to end on another glimmer of a good note. We have a really strong team in Vermont. We may not have a governor who stands as vocally against the things that this administration is doing, but every time I call the governor and say, I need to meet with your cabinet to brief you on the concerns that we have in the run-up to the election, he says yes. He believes in vote by mail. He believes in same-day voter registration. He actually believes, which I believe as well, that in 2024, the great gains that Phil Scott made in terms of flipping legislative seats was due to the convenience of universal vote by mail and the convenience of being able to register to vote same day. And we have a tremendous Attorney General. Charity Clark and her team are fabulous. And I could not imagine being in this fight at this moment without her at the helm of the Attorney General's office, because it doesn't matter. She's not questioning whether I think it's right or wrong. She's not questioning whether she should be assessing that an election executive order is right or wrong. She is in the fight. She is ready to take the gloves off and go. And I think she's sued the Trump administration over 50 times now, and you know, that small but mighty team is, I don't know how they look as bright-eyed as they do when I have meetings with them, because I think they must be working 24 hours a day. But we are very fortunate to have the team that we have. We are also very fortunate to be collaborating with other states who are in the similar position that we are. We are waiting for the results of our motion to dismiss the DOJ lawsuit demanding your voter records go to the federal government. By the way, I assume that the reason they wanted those so badly is so that they could use them to create that database of who's allowed to vote and who's not allowed to vote. It's not because it's not because anybody actually believes that there are people who are ineligible to vote. It seems more a mechanism to create a scenario where they can choose who gets to vote. We're still waiting for the answer from the judge on our motion to dismiss the DOJ lawsuit. But this administration is 0 for 19 on the states that have gone before us. So we really hope and expect and cross our fingers and, you know, do a little jig, whatever you need to do for good luck, that our lawsuit will go that way as well. And we have the systems in place to run free, fair, secure, and accessible elections in Vermont. And we are working hard every single day. In fact, I got a message from my election director at, just before 6 o'clock as I was coming up the highway to come here. He's still at work, he's still pulling data, and he's still doing everything that needs to be done to make sure we have a good primary next week. A little preview of the primary. We are tracking a little behind the turnout for the 2024 primary. We are tracking about 2.5% turnout in terms of early voting so far in the primary, which is very low. We are lucky in primaries if we can get to 15 or 20% turnout in primaries. And we want people to make their selections in their primary, because oftentimes, if there's one party that is more dominant in a community, the primary is where it's at, right? Because the general election won't be a contest if most of the people in that community tend to vote one party versus the other. So vote.vermont.gov is where you can get your voter guide for the primary. And I looked up the list of towns in the Chittenden County area because you have some contested primaries this year. So I figured, well, I would expect that there would be a lot of Chittenden County towns in the top 20. And there aren't as many as I thought. But if you happen to be from Shelburne or South Burlington or Essex City or Junction, those 4 communities are all in the top 20 in terms of turnout. Still pretty low. So please remind your friends to get out and vote. We brought along some Your Vote is Your Voice stickers and some Freedom and Unity comic books and some other resources on the back table. So before you leave here tonight, please do take a wander by the back table. I have thrown a lot at you, and I want to give a moment to pause here so that, oh, look at this. This is my friend Vanna. Let's shift gears and start to take some of your questions. So there were little cards. If you have a question, you can write on your card.
Great, and if anyone's got, I've got a few. If anyone's got any to pass my way, I'll take them. And if anyone has a question that comes to mind, go ahead and scribble it down, and I'll be glad to take it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Wow. And I should say this after Q&A, but I'm going to say it now. It's very heartening to hear about the strong leadership we have, which includes yourself, obviously, at the state level, and of course Attorney General Clark and our governor, and it's heartening to hear that we've got a team that's committed to free, fair, secure, and accessible elections. So thank you. There's a couple of just a quick informational, and this came up on a question, and it also occurred to me. At 70%, we're doing pretty well comparatively, aren't we?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. We're probably in the top 5 to 10, would you say? Yeah, I would think so.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, first question, which occurred to me as well. Do you have interactions with other states about protecting the voting process from the U.S. president in the event that he goes beyond what's already been done in terms of actual federal interference in whatever form that might take?
So yes, absolutely. You know, you should never go into a fight with one hand tied behind your back, and Vermont is a pretty small state, right? So it behooves us to look to our partners, our neighbors in other states. And so a lot of that work has tended to come together around others of my fellow Democratic secretaries of state, in part because some of the Republican secretaries of state are doing what we see a lot of folks in Congress do, which is that they are unwilling to speak clearly and boldly about the things that are going wrong and about the things that would be absolutely unacceptable. There's a lot of reasons why that happens. We don't need to get into them here, but we tend to work closely with states like Minnesota and Maine and Connecticut. We are partnering with a lot of those states to think about, you know, what are the potential scenarios that we could be facing in the run-up to the election, or frankly, in the weeks following the election, because some states have a postmark law that says if your ballot arrives having been postmarked by Election Day, it has up to 5 days to get to the election office. So that delays the results. We don't have a postmark law in Vermont. Your ballot has to be in the hands of your clerk by 7 p.m. on election night. But there's going to be a long tail of results coming in. And interestingly, I mean, I like to geek out with the numbers from time to time. You probably do as well. But in those states that have redistricted their congressional maps just this year, which is, well, it's ludicrous to do that in an election year. It's hard on the election officials who have to adapt to that. It virtually guarantees that there will be mistakes made because of the rushed nature of this redistricting. But here's the interesting potential outcome of some of that I don't think really occurred to the president when he called for people to do that redistricting so fast. If you take a solidly blue district and you carve it up into a wagon wheel and you put some of those blue voters out in all of these other districts, those districts become more purple. And those districts that have become more purple across this country could end up flipping to blue, which of course, Donald Trump would say is election fraud. It's actually not. It's actually math, and it's actually logic, because right now, the things that this president is missing in terms of his leadership is people are suffering right now. People have lost their health insurance subsidies. They're paying higher gas prices. They're seeing their costs at the grocery store go up and up and up. These tariff wars are, tariffs are on, tariffs are off. It is harming their businesses. It's harming their communities. It's harming the economy in different regions of this country. And people are fed up. And if they're fed up at a president in the midterms of a presidential administration, that usually means that Congress is going to flip. So we could see some of those districts that used to be solidly red and were gerrymandered to be purple actually flipping blue, and then all hell's going to break loose. So then we'll be talking about what we do after the election in the event that there are forces that are refusing to certify the elections. And believe me, we've been talking about that scenario with our allies. with our legal experts as well, because that has to be, every doomsday scenario that you can think of, we've had to think through and figure out what we're going to do. So throw them all at me.
Well, that's.
Do you want to just yell? Or
Yeah, I'll just holler.
Okay.
Is that all right? I'll just holler. So there's a lot of questions you answered, and then you've gestured to a lot of questions that are already in here. So first, when you say "we," I want to know who the "we" is, and this kind of speaks
Yep.
to a question, do you have allies within the national association?
Yep.
If not allies among secretaries of state, allies among big legal firms
Yes.
that do work in this area. And do you have quiet allies, sympathizers, empathizers, concerned voices on the GOP side?
Yep. That is a great question. And I can tell you that the National Association of Secretaries of State is a fascinating place to be right now when we are all in this crucible under this microscope at this moment in time. Because there really is a lot of common understanding and common frustration that this is all backwards, that states determine how we run elections, and only Congress, and only if they can pass, a law in Congress in both chambers that is signed by the president, only then can they dictate change on how we run elections in this country. There's a lot of frustration. The difference is what happens when we walk outside the doors of that secretary's only meeting and we're talking publicly. Because I will say very plainly, it is wrong, it is illegal, it is unconstitutional, it is unwise, it is disenfranchising voters, it is making our elections less secure, and my Republican colleagues will not say that. Then they don't say very much of that. And, this moment that we're in this country, the power that this president wields, because he will take retribution against people who disagree with him, is a tremendously sinister, caustic, and costly impact. And it is affecting how Republican secretaries and Republican congresspeople are able to meet this moment. I think the only people in Congress who we have seen stand up to this president are the people who either lost their primary or decided that they weren't running again. And that is just so harmful to our democracy. We are supposed to have 3 equal branches of government where the president gives an idea, but the Congress can say, no, that's not a good idea. And right now, because of the way this president wields power, it's really hard for Republicans to offer any sort of pushback. And the secretary's only conversations are good conversations. We have it out from time to time. We disagree about little details or about how, as an organization, as a nonpartisan organization, we should respond in any given moment. But we really do, at the end of the day, we have a common understanding that it is wrong to suppose that the chief executive can tell us how we're going to do elections.
Let's stay on this topic.
Oh, great.
There's a few others that hopefully we'll have time to get to.
Yep.
And there's sort of 2 questions here about what's the plan if Wednesday after Election Day, Thursday, that either the president or Speaker of the House or other secretaries of state refuse to honor results.
Yeah, so the best plan at this point is to make sure that we have our legal experts and our allies lined up with their briefs already written, except for the particulars of whatever wild scenario is coming about. and that we fight it out in the courts. And that is a really dissatisfying answer for me, because I like election night results. I don't want to have to wait 6 weeks or 12 weeks for something to make its way through the courts. But that's the way we've been fighting thus far. It has been long, it has been slow, but it has been largely successful. The rate that this Department of Justice is losing lawsuits is unfathomable. If you look at the entire history of the Department of Justice, they've lost more cases in the last year and a half than they have in the history of the Department of Justice. But we are thinking through all of these scenarios. So there's almost nothing that you could ask me in terms of a particular that I wouldn't say, oh yeah, I thought about that at 3 a.m, last Tuesday, and when I got up the next day, this is what I did to prep for it. But it is unsatisfying to understand that we will probably be in a state of flux for weeks or months after the election. I mean, do you remember back to 2020, the hanging Chad? So my youngest child was born November 17th of 2020, and so I was laboring in the hospital, watching the news coverage of all of the butterfly ballots and the hanging Chads and all that, and I leaned over to my husband and I said, if she's a boy, we're gonna name her Chad. Because wouldn't that be funny? Anyway, it's a terrible time to be laboring, but that was November 17th for a beginning of November election. So it's going to be weeks and months if there are court cases. Now, there are other scenarios that we are all thinking about, talking about now that hopefully will prevent some of that. So the question becomes, what happens if the president sends some agency of law enforcement to seize ballots before they go out from the print shop, right? We're a universal vote by mail state, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, California, also universal vote by mail states. So what happens if they start sending armed troops to seize ballots before they even get to the Postal Service? We've thought about that scenario. What happens if they send ICE agents to polling places? Thank your legislator, because the Vermont legislature passed a prohibition against civil arrests in sensitive locations like hospitals and schools, and they fought very hard to include polling places in that bill. So please thank your legislator for that.
Let's sort of think comparatively a little bit and compare Vermont to some other states with which you might be familiar. And I mean, the advantage of Vermont is, yes, we do certainly have competitive races, but we're really, in terms of national races, it's not that competitive here. Mm-hmm. But what I wonder about is, when you think about how we do things, I would say like what should other states learn from us? I'd just say, what do we do well? And appended to that, I'd say, if we think about other states that are more competitive, which ones give you the greatest concern and why? That you know about.
Yeah. So what we do really well is we have 247 duly sworn town and city clerks for a population about the size of the city of Boston. So if you think about how Boston might run its elections, it's probably got lots of different precincts and lots of different polling places, and a single sworn, election official who oversees that. In Vermont, we have 247 of them, and each of them knows their community inside and out. Even in some of our largest communities, your town clerk is all in your business, I can tell you. I talked to Charity Clark. She said, when I ran into my town clerk at the Hannaford in Williston, one of our largest communities, she said, I was floored at how many people she was reminding that they hadn't yet renewed their dog license. So, those are the people who are keeping track of our elections. Those are the people who are supported by our office to make sure that they're reviewing the checklist. Every odd-numbered year, they review the entire checklist in their community, and they sit down with all the other boards of civil authority members, and they say, oh, I think didn't the Petersons move out of town? you know, and then they talk about it, and then somebody tries to figure out, yeah, I remember, and then the clerk will say, yeah, well, I registered the deed for the people who bought their house, so yeah, they moved out of town. And so they put that voter in a challenge status, and that begins the process of making sure that our voter rolls are cleaned up. And if you're in a challenge status, you don't automatically receive a ballot in the mail. You have to show up on election day and say, oh no, I still live here, I'm just renting an apartment down the road now. And you renew your voter registration, same-day voter registration in Vermont. So we have really secure elections because we have so many eyes on it, and because we're so small that we can do that, right? Some of the states that give me concern, you know, Louisiana gives me concern because Louisiana does not have traceable paper ballots. They still have electronic voting systems, which, you know, our paper ballots are one way that we can know. You know, if we think something went wrong, those ballots are kept in your town clerk's vault for 22 months. We can go back and recount them if we have to. We know with paper ballots that we can trace the results. There are some counties in Texas that don't use paper ballots as well, so that's a concern. 99% of the country does use paper ballots, so we do have the ability to trace them. There are some states that have actually done the things that President Trump is calling for, and decided to do things like doing away with tabulators. Now, I don't know, a tabulator is just, it's an optical scan machine. You remember filling in the little circles, right? It goes into the machine says, yes, there's ink in that circle, no, there's not. Once those machines are programmed and calibrated and tested, they are more accurate than a human being on their best day. And I can tell you that at 7 or 8 or 9 p.m. on election night, there are no humans in that room who are having their best day. They're all exhausted, right? So the tabulators are our best bet to get accurate election results. But for some reason, the president thinks that we should do away with tabulators. So he's calling on states, and different localities have probably already done this, to eliminate using those machines to count the ballots. These machines are not connected to the internet. They are kept under lock and key with a strict chain of custody. They are tested and calibrated by your town or city clerk in the days leading up to when we start to scan ballots. And if there's ever a problem, they're calling us or they're calling the tabulator vendor, and we're getting them a new tabulator on that election day so that we can be sure that those tabulators are working and they're working well. And it's wild that some states or localities are doing away with that, because that's going to delay the counting of the results in a voting jurisdiction that has 500,000 or 1 million voters. And we all know how the president feels about voting results that are delayed. So it's a little illogical to me that, you know, if you like fast results, that doesn't mean you throw away every ballot at, 9 p.m. on election night and nobody else's ballots get counted. It means that you stay until you've counted every single eligible voter's ballot.
So, pivoting a little bit, and I'm going to modify this question a little bit. If folks want to support free, fair, and secure elections, and accessible elections,
Yes.
besides voting, what can they do? Both in Vermont and outside of Vermont.
Yes.
And this kind of speaks to a question, maybe these questions can be joined, maybe they can't be, is to think, who do you see as your allies, especially in the civic space, that folks might connect with?
I think you should take a look at the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State. I know we are a nonpartisan group here. I am nonpartisan in my official capacity, but when I need people to team up with, I have to team up with people who run under the same label that I do, because we are all able to be free from that yoke of obeying Trump the way some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are. So take a look at Dems of State, I think is the email or the website, sorry, for DAS, the Democratic Association. There are 26 open Secretary of State races in this country right now. These are the people who will be running the elections in those states for the presidential election in 2028. This is a really important time to be electing secretaries who will follow the rule of law, whatever the laws of that state are, and I love some of them and I dislike some other laws that other states have, but we need people who will vow to follow the laws of their state, and there are some really vehement election deniers who are on ballots to run for Secretary of State in some states. There were reasonable Republicans serving as secretaries in those states, and they lost their primary because they weren't MAGA enough. So it's really important to keep an eye on those Secretary of State races. But then I want to come much more local, right? We all know the battleground states, and we know, we can see all the pundits talking about the congressional maps and what state is going to elect, who to Congress. And yeah, that's important. But I want to come back to what happens here in Vermont, because the really nefarious thing that has come about because of all of these ideas that this president has that will disenfranchise voters, will make our elections less secure, less fair, less accessible. Some states that have Republican-controlled legislatures are adopting those ideas into their own state laws. And that is the legal way to do it, not by executive order, because the president doesn't get to decree, but by bullying those state legislatures into doing that. We have some of the strongest election law in the country. We are routinely ranked in the top 5 by MIT and their election ranking. And I don't want to see us backsliding because we lose more good legislators who will stand up to this MAGA disenfranchisement BS. We've got to keep our eye on what's happening here in Vermont, because in 2024, we lost a lot of really good people who stand firm for the free, fair, accessible, and secure elections that we have. And the threat here in Vermont is that if we continue to slide, and there is a ton of money that is coming into Vermont to try to defeat some more of these strong legislators who believe in your right to vote and will defend your right to vote and will stand up against documentary proof of citizenship and will stand up against eliminating vote by mail. So we've got to keep our eyes on home as well. Home.
Okay, 2 things about home. Okay, just so folks know, your term of office is
2 years.
2 years.
Yes.
So you're up again.
Yes. I get to run every single time.
And correct me if I'm wrong, most secretaries of state, not all, are elected in most jurisdictions.
There is a fair mix. Okay. Some are appointed by their governor, some are elected but by their legislature, and some are elected by the populace.
So my question is, I want to go back to the clerks.
Yeah.
One thing that folks have talked about is the incredible duress that election officials are under in this day and age.
Yep.
In the form of threats and
Yep.
just lack of morale,
Yep.
both sort of quiet threats and then threats from on high about criminalizing their activities. How's the morale? How do you keep people kind of doing what they do? And have you seen kind of a softening of, of that element of your kind of election administration, insofar as folks are getting kind of tired?
Yeah. Well, if the first Trump administration didn't drive folks out, COVID started to drive folks out. And in the years since COVID, we have seen about a 30% turnover in town and city clerks. This is a hard job. It's hard because of the climate that we're in right now with respect to elections and the things that the president says. But in many cases, these people are also the people who have to collect your property taxes, which is never a fun job to do because people like to complain about having to pay their property taxes. So we've seen a lot of turnover. When I came into office, I was sworn in January of 2023, and I started up a town clerk advisory group. It's a hand-selected group of about a dozen clerks from big towns and small. Sarah Montgomery from here in Burlington was in my first cohort, and we absolutely, this group of clerks range from, my office is only open, 1-2 days a week, and I work alone most days, to Sarah Montgomery, who's got, a team of folks who are working with her in our largest community. This group comes together. It's an opportunity for me to give, to hear feedback from them. How is this working? What do you hear from your colleagues? What should we do differently? How can we help? And that has been really helpful to understand, both the needs of a small community with part-time clerk or a large community with dozens of staff members. But for them to be able to come together with, with a peer group that they can phone when they have a question about what's happening, something that they haven't encountered before, is really valuable. So I'm definitely going to continue to do that. We'll start up our third cohort probably after the November election. And, if you want to influence elections here, you should go to your clerk and say, how can I help? And you should definitely, even if you don't have the time to help, you should definitely tell your clerk thank you because there are many aspects of the job of clerk that are that most people are completely oblivious to and are sort of thankless tasks. But these are good and earnest people who took an oath to do that very difficult job, and they do a remarkable job at it. So tell them thank you.
Good spot to stop. There were a few other questions, but sorry we couldn't get to them. But I, despite the very kind of unsettling times we're living in with respect to elections and democracy, again, I'm very heartened to hear that we have a great team in Montpelier and probably Waterbury too. Right? Are you in both places? Or?
Our offices are Montpelier and Middlesex.
And Middlesex, okay.
Yeah, Middlesex is where the archives is.
Thanks to the secretary and thanks to you all for your great questions.
Thank you for coming.